I'm Alex Michelson. This week, the issue is California's Senate race. A big announcement from our team about hosting the first TV debate of this crucial race. With us to discuss, Politico's Melanie Mason and USC's Bob Shrum. Then the issue is Trump versus Biden ramping up before either have won a single delegate in their party's nominations. Former Hardball host Chris Matthews is here to talk about that and pay tribute to the Carter family as the issue is starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
Welcome to a new year here on The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michelson. We start things off with a big announcement alongside two of our all-time favorite people. Melanie Mason is a senior political writer covering California politics for Politico after years covering both D.C. and Sacramento. Bob Shrum is the director of the USC Center for the Political Future after decades of running some of the biggest campaigns in Democratic politics. So we've got our three organizations coming together to host the first debate in the U.S. Senate race in California. It's going to be Monday, January 22nd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. on USC's campus, air live on TV on Fox 11 Los Angeles, various Issue Is affiliates across the state, air live on the radio on KFI AM 640 and various iHeart radio stations across California, and stream live on Politico's homepage, Fox 11's homepage. Melanie and myself are co-moderators. We'll be asking some of your questions. You can email us, kttvdebate@fox.com, to give us some of your questions. Melanie, why does this debate matter?
Well, you and I have been following this campaign for a year now, but the truth is that the action starts now, and it's between now and the next month before ballots first go out, and it really feels like we're finally get to see this campaign action that I think we've all been eagerly waiting, seeing all of these top candidates on the stage, engaging with each other, I think really is going to sort of set this race into motion.
The question coming out of the primary is going to be whether we're going to have two Democrats running against each other or whether we're going to have a Democrat and a Republican.
So the qualifying criteria to get into this debate we came up with was the top four finishers in this recent Politico Morning Consult poll. You can see it here. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff out ahead with Republican baseball legend Steve Garvey bunched up with Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter and Barbara Lee in a tight matchup for second place. Also registering support in our poll, Republicans James Bradley and Eric Early, Democratic former journalist Christina Pascucci, and Republican Denise Gray Pandal. So let's go through each candidate one by one that made the stage and talk about where they go from here. Let's start with Adam Schiff, who right now is leading in the polls, leading in endorsements, and leading in fundraising. This is information we first reported this week. Schiff's campaign says he's raised $6.3 million in quarter four. That includes some interest. They report 93,000 unique donors, an amazing $35 million cash on hand. We don't have the fundraising numbers yet from the other campaigns. Bob, as somebody who ran campaigns, what can you do with $35 million cash on hand? You
can blanket the television advertising, the airwaves, and you can really get your message out. Now, Schiff starts with, they each have certain advantages, but Schiff's advantage is that he was so prominent in going after Donald Trump when he was president that he got very well known to the Democratic electorate. So he's going to use that, I would predict, in his television ads.
Schiff, what's he looking for with this debate?
Well, I think that for him it is to establish, can he make this debate about him versus Steve Garvey? Because since we have seen Schiff leading in the polls, we can probably assume that he's well positioned to place in these top two. And what he really wants to do is run against a Republican in the fall. Because California is such a blue state, it's much less competitive if he's running against a Republican. So if he can make this debate about him versus Garvey, and by extension, him versus Trump, which plays into his main message, it allows him to sort of maybe dismiss these other Democrats who could give him a tighter run for his money if he ran against them in November.
Well, let's talk now about Steve Garvey. We've never seen him on a debate stage before. He's never done something like this before. He's got the challenge of trying to consolidate the Republican base while also not alienating folks who may be in the middle.
Well, that's why I think it's smart of him to be on that debate stage. Because if he hadn't been, and some other Republican had been, it would have opened up the possibility that he'd get a Republican competitor. Right now, I think it's going to be very hard for any other Republican but Steve Garvey to get into the general election. And it's unlikely if he gets in that he'll win, given the nature of California. You're absolutely right about that. By the way, the other thing I think is Adam Schiff, because he's got two women on that stage with him, while he wants to make this about him and Garvey, he's going to have to be respectful of them. He's going to have to be very careful in how he deals with them.
Well, let's talk about one of those women right now, Katie Porter, who coming into this before Garvey's recent rise seemed like she was neck and neck with Adam Schiff. What's the challenge for her?
Well, I think that there does seem to be a little bit of a slowing in the momentum for polls for her. But I think that this could be a huge breakout moment for Porter. She is very good in debates. She's very quick on her feet. She's very good at harnessing these viral moments like we've seen with the whiteboard. And so I think that if she is able to deliver some crisp answers, maybe put some of her fellow Democrats on the spot, that could sort of reignite that interest in her, remind people why she's become such a national phenomenon in such a short period of time.
What would your advice be to her?
That she needs to go in there and she needs to go in there with a message. It needs to be a tight message. It just can't be about the medium, the whiteboard. It has to be why me and not the others. And she has to do it in a respectful way, too. Democrats are not going to necessarily take very kindly if one of those Democratic candidates goes in there with an axe and goes after another Democrat. So you got to thread the needle.
Barbara Lee's had a pretty clear message when it comes to I'm anti-war. And we've had this Israel-Hamas situation. She's been very pro-ceasefire, which has helped her with some young folks and progressives on the Democratic side.
Oh, that's how she's going to position herself in the debate. This goes back 20 years. I mean, but I think it is a positioning that has some promise. Don't forget, Bernie Sanders won the California presidential primary in 2020.
And 2016.
Yeah, in 2016.
Yeah.
But 2020, he won it when it was absolutely clear that Joe Biden was already the nominee.
Your thoughts on Barbara Lee?
Well, I think that the Bernie Sanders comparison is an apt one because the truth is that she needs those Bernie Sanders voters to come out on March 5th and in the run-up to it to vote for her. And I think that the Israel-Hamas war has offered her this opportunity to reinforce this anti-war message that she has had, and it does align her with the progressive base of the party, with younger voters, with voters of color. What the problem for her, though, is that those are voters that are maybe less likely to be showing up in the primary, and so she has to figure out how to motivate these voters, particularly without a competitive presidential primary on the Democratic side. So she might be sort of aligned with them ideologically, but unless she can really motivate them to vote, that's going to be a problem for her.
Got to get out and vote. Bob, Melanie, we're so excited to work with you on this. We're spending a lot of time together in the next few weeks. So up next, we're going to have your old pal Chris Matthews talking politics on national politics. But we always go to break with music. And since this is happening at USC, we're playing the top-selling song ever recorded by USC, which is Tusk by the USC Trojan Marching Band, also featuring Fleetwood Mac. So, Melanie, you get to enjoy being a Trojan, an honorary Trojan, for the next few weeks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tusk. UCLA sucks. Okay.
I think you're going to cut that.
That's the slogan. Yeah.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
the question
You want to put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you
Who
shut
is
up,
your,
man?
listen,
A reminder of just how ugly the Trump versus Biden matchup was last time around. And this week, the two acting as if they're the party's nominees, even though no one has technically voted yet. Let's talk about the 2024 race and more with one of the most popular and successful TV pundits of all time. Chris Matthews is back with us here on The Issue Is, joining us via Zoom. For 20 years, of course, Chris hosted Hardball on MSNBC. He also hosted the syndicated Chris Matthews Show, which I loved. He's written numerous best-selling books. His latest book is called This Country, My Life in Politics and History. Chris Matthews, welcome back to The Issue Is.
It's great to be on. Thank you.
So former President Donald Trump is facing 91 felony counts, 2 states now actively trying to keep him off the ballot, and yet his poll numbers keep going up, remaining dominant. Let's look at the latest Real Clear Politics average of polls showing Trump with 51% support in Iowa, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in second with around 19% support. Let's go to New Hampshire now. Big lead for Trump there as well. Trump at 46%. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley around 25%. At this point, Chris, can Trump be stopped?
Probably not, because of the MAGA factor. It's an unusual thing in politics to see such solidity in support. I mean, I have a brother like this. I had three of them that voted for the first time. One is going completely the other direction. One of them is off him, but there's one that's still with him. There's something about it's a societal thing. And my brother puts it this way: I'm for Trump, and so are all my friends. He always says it the same way, and so are all my friends. I think out there in the rural areas, in Pennsylvania, for example, where you get away from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Penn State, and you get where it's about 70%. I think that's up to 75 to 80% now. I think it's a real challenge for the Democrats because that's blossoming out there. And there are a lot of cultural factors that the president of Harvard withdrawing herself from that position, the border situation, it's a classic example of a mob at the gate. Listen to the line here: the mob at the gate and the rot at the top. The rot at the top is a key factor in this kind of push against the authority figures in our country. This is all about, they're grouping them all together. And Joe Biden, for whatever reason, is put right in the middle of the elite and defending the mob. So he's defending the mob, and he is among the elite. And this huge mass of people in the middle, the working people, middle class people, whatever you call them, are aggrieved. So there's a tremendous sense of being on the outside.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden is seen as being on the inside.
Right.
This is so ridiculous.
Well,
He's not an insider.
Isn't it?
Look at Joe Biden. He's plays golf down at Rehoboth. He's just some guy. Who went to Syracuse, who went to Delaware University. He's not part of the elite.
Well, he's been a senator since he was 30 years old. I mean, he's been a part of the elite for a long time. But then you think of how amazing is it, though, that Donald Trump, a guy who is literally a billionaire, who lives up in a golden tower, has become the guy for the folks who are trying to take down the elite. It's amazing how he's pulled that off.
And of course, on the side, he brags about having going to Wharton at Penn.
An Ivy League school.
He gets it both ways, just like Howie, just like J.D. Vance. The whole bunch of them are pulling this number. Don't you see it? They all went to Ivy League schools. They all are elite culturally and economically, and yet they play this role. This is very smart. It's a great, it's a double life. Internally, they've had the advantages of our society, but externally, they're the guy on the street corner begging for quarters. I don't know. He just, it's such a good game for the right-wing people to play.
So let's talk about the general election. The Real Clear Politics average of polls shows that Trump is actually ahead of Biden by about 2 points. Of course, we're a ways away. National polls don't ultimately matter. It's about swing states.
What do those two numbers tell you? How far is he ahead in the Electoral College?
Right, exactly.
Right there, because he's already, California is 4 or 5 million. New York's a couple million, 7 million altogether. And so that you just take that off, you still win in the Electoral College if you're Trump. You can still do it.
And broadly speaking, it appears clear that Biden has an enthusiasm issue right now among Democrats, especially young people. And he's at risk for them, not that they're going to vote for Trump, but that they don't vote at all. And then Trump's people who are excited about him show up and they win. What does Biden do about that?
This is going to be a white knuckle fight for people on the Democratic side. This is going to be close. Joe Biden is going to be 82 by the end of this fight. But he's got to get out there and do the whistle stops, campaign everywhere. And he's got to find the right role for Kamala Harris, which I think is talking to young people about their issues and all kinds of issues, not just abortion rights, all kinds of issues, and broaden her attack. This guy, he's got to build his cabinet up and use the cabinet. That's it. And some wealthy people like Buffett and people like that, they should be coming and saying the economy's in good shape, and this guy brought us back. That's what I think.
Up next, Chris is going to reflect on his old boss, former President Jimmy Carter, and his wife, Rosalind. Stay with us. More with Chris Matthews here on The Issue Is, right after this. Here is a photo of a young Chris Matthews as a speechwriter for then President Jimmy Carter. Chris Matthews is back with us. Chris, we lost Rosalind Carter recently. We know Jimmy Carter remains in hospice care. What do you want people to remember about the Carters?
I think it was, you know, I didn't know him well enough to get to the answer to this. I think he might have been a pacifist, meaning I think he really didn't like the use of guns, gunplay. And here's what I think. The first thing he did when he became president was to say what a great president that Jerry Ford was, that he had brought the country back to itself again after Watergate. First thing he said, when he went to the White House the first day in the office, the first thing he did was pardon all the people that went to Canada because of the Vietnam War. And, you know, it was never argued about again. Some of the military may have had a problem with it, but he basically said, I want this fight to be over with. I want to end the fight. The way to end fights is not to start a war like in Afghanistan or Iraq. That doesn't end the fighting. Then he had brought the Egyptians in. He brought in Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. He went to Camp David, and in 13 days he worked out a deal where Egypt would recognize Israel, and had never broken that treaty. He's constantly trying to end wars, and even in the Iranian hostage situation, he was trying to figure out what he could do to end that crisis and get the hostages home. He didn't declare war, which would have probably gotten him elected again. He said, I'm going to bring those people home alive, all of them. And that means no war. Because as we know, we've learned recently, in war, hostages are killed. So he said, even though it cost him the presidency and his own humility, really, his pride, he made that decision. So I think he was a man of peace. And I think he paid a lot of price for it. And that's it.
What did he mean? What did he mean to you personally? How did he change your life?
Well, he was a kind man. I mean, he didn't like all the speeches, but but I loved it because, you know, there's nothing like typing out on a Selectric 2 what the President of the United States is going to stop and say at the next stop. There's nothing like that. That's fun.
That's pretty amazing. Up next, Chris, we're going to bring back one of your signature segments from your show. Tell me something I don't know. And Chris, we like to play music on this show. And did you know that Selena Gomez was a big hardball fan? Well, she must be, because we go to break with her song, which is called Tell Me Something I Don't Know.
A little different style than hardball.
Norah O'Donnell, tell me something I don't know.
For years, the Chris Matthews Show featured a segment called Tell Me Something I Don't Know. Scoops and predictions from the top reporters and pundits in the country. I love that segment. This week, Chris is back on The Issue Is, so we're once again turning the tables on him. So, Chris Matthews, tell me something I don't know.
Anyway, that was Norah O'Donnell right there.
Yeah.
She's one of the panelists, and now she's sitting in Walter Cronkite's chair right now. You know, this show, in addition to being entertaining and understanding and getting into the issues, is also about people feeling better about themselves. I worry about violence. Okay, I think the tenor of the country with people who are in criminal cases diving over the desk to get to the judge. Eric Swalwell being threatened the other day by a guy down in Florida. A guy getting killed out in Utah recently, with all the gruff language, coarse language, telling somebody to shut up, as you just showed in the program. I think it's going to lead to trouble. We are a violent country. And the school shootings. Do you think they're not going to go after politicians? And the anger that people have, even since January 6th of 21, when people still believe the FBI did it or Antifa did it. I mean, I don't know how they get to those things, those decisions based upon watching. We watched it. We all watched it. That happened. It happened in this country, an assault on our democracy. It's around us. What are we talking about? It might be there. It is.
Yeah, and there's still people that deny the Holocaust happened too, which is also crazy.
Well,
yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've been the acting chef. You got all the numbers right there.
All right.
They're
Well-
all there.
Well, obviously that was sort of a depressing note, but a true note, and something I've been talking a lot about lately as well. Let's end with something on a lighter note. This weekend, the Golden Globes kicks off award show season for California. Big deal for one of our biggest industries in this state.
Yeah.
Globes, of course, honor the best of TV and film at one time. I always loved when you used to talk about some of your entertainment favorites.
Yeah.
So Chris,
who's up for best film?
well, there's a bunch of them, but let's talk about your favorites though. What is your favorite TV show?
American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright.
Editors, they want a black book.
They have a black book. I'm black, and it's my book.
You know what I mean.
He is astounding. This is America. This is so much about stereotypes and how we expect people to be and who they really are and how they can find it funny in an awful way. So I think Jeffrey Wright, and he went to St. Albans where my kids went, and I think that's great. And I also love The Holdover. You mentioned it before. I think The Holdover, Paul Giamatti, these guys, I saw him in Sideways the first time. Here he is again.
Yeah, and of course some of the other big movies of this year, Oppenheimer, Barbie, Maestro. So we'll see
Maestro
which
is
ends up.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I think Maestro is going to be talked about for a long time. I think Brad Cooper is really something else. And he's trying, he's reaching for the stars. He keeps going for bigger and bigger.
It's pretty big.
You know, he's a really impressive guy. He could be just doing the same role over and again, but no, he goes for the big ones, you know.
Well, thank you for sharing what you think. We really appreciate it. Peter Hamby is going to be with us next week. In honor of the Globes,
he's great.
we leave you with Hollywood Nights by Bob Seger for the Hollywood Nights ahead. Chris, thanks for being here. We'll see you all next
Hey, it's
time
great.
for
I'd
more
love to come
of
on.
The Issue Is. Great job, Chris. Thank you.